and welcome to the Crooked Letter Sports Podcast, the show about Mississippi sports and the folks who play them. I'm Tyler Cleveland, joined as always by my co-host and dad, Rick Cleveland of Mississippi Today fame. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
Good.
Just fine.
Good. I know you see me wearing this hoodie. It was kind of crisp this morning.
It's just my favorite time of the year.
It's pretty
Absolutely.
incredible. It's pretty incredible out there. It finally feels like football season, and that's good because we are absolutely rocking and rolling now. Dad, want to talk a lot about Ole Miss football today. The Rebels are 6-0 and ranked number 5 in the country, facing their biggest challenge to date at Georgia this weekend. We're going to get into that with our guest, Jeff Roberson of Ole Miss, a longtime sports writer, covered Ole Miss, now works with the university. I believe his title is Special Assistant to the Athletic Director, an archivist. So excited to talk to him about the Rebels and his new book that he co-authored with a bunch of people, including you, Stories from Ole Miss Baseball. I'm going to get into that. Dad, I want to talk a little bit first about the weekend that was and the weekend ahead in college football. I think the big story here is going to be that Ole Miss-Georgia game, but we've got several other tantalizing matchups. We'll start with Mississippi State at Florida. The Bulldogs coming off a bye. They're 8.5-point underdogs. What's your take on this game?
It's hard to figure out how they're 8.5-point underdogs. I don't know. Florida's like Jekyll and Hyde. The 1 week they'll beat the socks off Texas, and next week go back to being mediocre. So I don't know. State will give them I think State will give them a really good game. I'm surprised that the spread is that big. I feel like if you just told me on its face, if you cover up the records and say Mississippi State at Florida and they're 8.5-point dogs, that's not, because you get 3 for being at home. I don't think it's that bad. But you take Mississippi State's 4-2, Hunt and win number 5, Florida at 2-4. I think the takeaway on Florida is they have the players. I mean, you look at them, they look good getting off the bus. They sure do, Oh, yeah, they look as good as anybody getting off the bus, and they've got so much speed on defense. It's hard to figure.
You like the Bulldogs' chances coming off the bye?
Oh, I think they can win the game. Yeah, I think they can win the game, and I certainly like them with 8.5 points. But
that's why
I'm wrong a lot.
The Southern Miss not coming off a bye. That game against Georgia Southern last Thursday night, really weird game. They scored 4 straight touchdowns, took a big lead in the first half, and then held on for a 38-35 win. Was their first road win since 2023.
Yeah, they can't complain about anything.
No. You get a win on the road for the first time in 2 years, you got to take it. But apparently the odds makers were so impressed with their first road win in 2 years that they are a 4.5-point favorite this weekend on the road at UL Lafayette.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised at that too. I thought they would be it'd be a picket game, or maybe Southern might be a 1 or 2 point favorite. But I don't know. It's an interesting game for one reason, because it's Charles Huff returning to the scene where he won the Sun Belt Conference last year at Marshall with a lot of the same players. They beat Lafayette in the championship game down there last year. It ought to be a good game. Southern needs to win it.
They do need to win it. And we're halfway home here, right? So And now that we've seen the first half of the season under first-year coach Charles Huff, give me an updated handicap. Do you think Southern Miss has a real shot to win the Sun Belt?
I certainly think they've got a shot to win their side.
Right.
And then it would be one game deal, which I'm telling you, and I've said it, I guess, every week on this show, that I think that the Southern Miss quarterback gives them a chance against anybody in that league. And plus, they're playing really good defense right now, or they were until the second half of the game the other night. But they're as good as anybody on that side of the conference.
Yeah, I like their chances at least getting there. We'll see how it plays out the rest of the way. I think they got to take a big step winning on Saturday.
Well, they'd be 3-0 in the league after not winning a single game last year. That's a pretty good turnaround.
Yeah. Very quickly, Dad, the Saints fell to 1-5 with a 25-19 loss to the Patriots on Sunday. Really tired of whoever they're playing quarterback having a career day. But Drake May did against the Saints, threw 3 touchdown passes and just made every big play on third down.
Yeah, that was my takeaway on the game, Tyler, is how good Drake May was. I mean, it didn't look like a fluke. I mean, he made every throw. He got away from a pretty good pass rush several times to make a play. He made some plays with his legs. The Saints played, they didn't play poorly. They're just not good enough.
They're not, but I will say this, they're closer than I thought they were. I mean, to be, even in the losses, I mean, they've been all but one of these things. I feel like they're just a couple players away, I think things are starting to solidify up front on offense. They just got to get over the hump somehow, and I think a lot of that has to do with the defense, which has been underwhelming so far this year, especially on third downs. Saints at Chicago on Sunday. Going to be a chilly noon kickoff in Chicago, where I wish we were going.
Yeah, I'd love to be there too.
I know, Soldier
I'd love
Field's
to be
so
in
cool.
Chicago.
Yeah, in general, although maybe not right this very second, but it's a great city and worth visiting for anybody who is up for it. Well, Dad, let's welcome in our guest today. It's a longtime friend of both of ours, longer for you, I might add. Jeff Roberson, who is these days, I believe, a special assistant to the athletic director at Ole Miss and an archivist, author of a couple of books, including Midnight Train, the story of his cousin, Jim Weatherly, who played quarterback at Ole Miss, and then wrote the song
Midnight Train to Georgia.
Yeah, that's right. And then his latest book, Stories from Ole Miss Baseball. Without further ado, let's welcome in today's guest, Jeff Roberson. Jeff, thanks so much for making time for us today.
Man, I appreciate y'all inviting me to be on. I think this is my first time, and I feel honored, so I appreciate it.
Well, I don't know how it took us so long to get to you, Jeff. We, you and I, and you and Rick go way back, and you and I go way back. I was telling Rick before you joined us, I'm pretty sure that you gave me my first assignment in sports writing. I want to say it was a tennis feature of some kind for the Ole Miss Spirit when I was a brash 18-year-old. So appreciate the opportunity, first of all.
Well, you got the brash part right.
Well, I remember those days when you were there, and I didn't remember the assignment whatsoever, but if you went out to cover, say, Billy Chadwick's tennis team, or Jerry Montgomery when back in the day, or whatever, the women's tennis team, the men's tennis team, they were all nationally reputable, so we were covering them pretty good back then, and they still do cover them well. But those were some good programs to get some feature stories out of.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I remember about it. What I do remember about the assignment was there was no assignment. It was like, go find a story at tennis, which was fun.
Tyler, I was pretty good about sending out somebody out to just go find a story, do something, and I didn't know what to. Maybe didn't have anything in mind, probably.
Well, I didn't mind at all. It was a crash course, which has served me well, by the way. So thanks for that, Jeff. We got you at an interesting time because Ole Miss ranked 5th in the country, 6-0 in football, maybe in the middle of a historic season, certainly by modern standards. And then right after your latest book came out, the Stories from Ole Miss Baseball, I know this was a collaboration, but you did a lot of heavy lifting on this thing, and congrats on all the success from it.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I'll jump in on the baseball book first, just briefly here. And thanks to Rick for writing a story, for the book in there that makes it more special when you have your friends write stories along with you. And Chase Parham is certainly a friend of mine. And I think he would tell you the same thing you did, that we kind of got him kicked off on his career back at the Ole Miss Spirit. And so that's been fun to journey through with him on this. But yeah, the baseball book, I tell one of the things I told Mike Bianco this the other day when we were kind of talking as we wrapped this book up and kind of got started on some signings. I said, Mike, I've spent more time at this baseball stadium than anywhere else in Oxford but my house. Because I said, you got 30, 40 games a year, postseason a lot of times, and, practices and fall ball and you add it up, most people would say, you mean you've been there more than football or basketball? Yeah, a lot more, I'd say.
Absolutely.
But, that's why I can feel comfortable and confident that we wrote a book that, fills in a lot of gaps for some folks and that hopefully people will enjoy.
It's a terrific book, Jeff.
Thank you, Rick.
I much enjoyed the reading it and remembering a lot of the things in it, and also I know you enjoyed doing it because when you work with Neil White on a book, it's going to be good, and it's going to be a pleasure to work with him.
I think the second part is as much important as the first part. Neil is so good to work with, and a lot of his books are things that I'm also interested in or that y'all are interested in. They're Mississippi centric or they're sports books or they're a lot of those kind of things. But yeah, Neil is, done an amazing job with Nautilus Publishing and certainly makes things go easily or smoothly as best he can. And yes, you couldn't ask for more.
I was talking with Neil yesterday, and he was telling me about how successful the book has been. I think it was the #1 book in Mississippi last week, and he also told me about the first signing where, God, the lineup you had there, it's pretty amazing. The Ole Miss Baseball people. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was, I guess you just say, an impressive lineup. We probably had 25 folks there at Off Square Books in Oxford, from, Buddy Chain, who lives in Oxford, who played on the 1956 College World Series team for Ole Miss as a junior or senior. I mean, he was a freshman in 53, so you can see his age, and that his wife was there with him. They're in great shape and have great stories, and we did a whole story with Mr. Chain and all the way up through Robert Kayette and Jake Gibbs and Don Kessinger and a lot of the people that you would always remember from that era, the earlier eras, and then through the 80s and 90s, and then into the Mike Bianco era, which but gave us an opportunity to write this book because, as you and I talked about back at the Mississippi Book Festival, what might have been able to put this book over the top is that we, won the national championship in 2022. So your interest continues to grow from that. But yeah, we had, people came back. David DeLucci was back. I mean, Hunter Elliott on the team now signed with us. But Charlie Babineau from Louisiana, who's was a team captain in 04 and 05 with Stephen Head, and just any number of guys that wanted to return. And when I would reach out to them, first thing they would say was, "I'll try to be there," and then they really did. And then a lot of people, were able to be there, but it was fun day in Oxford a couple of weeks ago.
Well, I'm glad the Ole Miss baseball family showed up for you. I know that's a pretty tight-knit group. And I feel like, the reason that the book was important is because, when people think about Ole Miss, they think about football and the history there. Whereas, somebody might think of, say Mississippi State, and you would think, baseball. And Ole Miss has got such a rich baseball tradition that I felt like kind of gets overshadowed sometimes. And I'm glad you wrote this book. You've been quite busy up there, Jeff. This football train is not really slowing down. Despite, like a lackluster showing on Saturday, this football team just keeps winning. They're 6-0. They're number 5 in the country. How exciting has it been to cover it on the ground, and what's the vibe there on campus?
Well, it's, I want to focus on one thing really right now, since it just happened, and that's the Washington State weekend. And Tyler, you've been around a long time, and Rick, you've been around a lot longer, and we've both been through lots of games and weekends, and all of us have seen different scenarios. I've never seen one quite like this weekend in Oxford, where a team from that far away, that's been a program that's been through so many, downs recently and kind of been left out to to fend for themselves almost. So, they bring in 5,000 or more Washington State fans to Oxford, and they're loud and they're into it like you would be at an SEC game. So, they all seemed to have a great time here. Even, they were, a competitive game. Obviously, they wanted to win, but I mean, I just heard so many good things from Washington State people, but the irony of it was, to me, along with those what we just said, was last year, Ole Miss played Wake Forest, and then Wake Forest chose not to return here, so Ole Miss needed a game. Washington State obviously had to have some games, and because of their situation, so signed them up pretty quick, and on the day that we played Washington State here last Saturday, Wake Forest was playing at Oregon State, who is the other team out there.
Right.
So I thought it made for a really unique, interesting, that's the kind of thing we writers, right, Rick, look for, and, oddities or intricacies of the game, but who would have ever thought that? But, that was just the latest one, and for Ole Miss, sneaked out a win. I mean, it was a competitive game. Y'all probably watched it. It was, one they certainly could have lost. And as I told Rick when we talked about doing this podcast, is, I've walked out of that stadium a lot of times with losses to Jacksonville State or Wyoming or Wake Forest or, the list of the folks you think that Ole Miss would beat at home. And this could certainly have been another one of those, but they managed to get to that 6-0 mark and then kind of reset to go to Georgia.
Yeah, there is a bottom line, and that's that they got it done. I was amazed too at the showing from Washington State fans. Man, that's a long trip to make. And believe me, I heard from a lot of them, Jeff, who apparently somebody, I don't even know if they might have put it up in the locker room where I said that Ole Miss might cover by halftime. Yeah, they didn't even come close to covering for the whole game. It was a great effort by Washington State. But what we really need to get to is the Georgia game. When do you think Ole Miss last played a game of this magnitude? I mean, this is huge for playoff implications for everything.
Well, in our world of college football right now and in the last decade or two, if College Game Day shows up, it's a pretty big deal, and your game is a headliner, and it didn't have to show up for this one for people to know that already. But Georgia and Alabama too has been the premier programs in the conference in the recent times, and who can forget? And we'd all like to over here that went the loss at Athens 2 years ago, and then. Ole Miss kind of focused on that and got the win at home last year in a big way. But when was the last time there was a game of this importance? There have been some that have come down the pipe, so to speak, over the years. But, this is, I think I'd just say the next time that they've been able to do this. And there haven't been as many. I mean, there were 50, 60 years ago maybe that were this kind of routine. Every once in a while you'd have one like this, but now they're a little more frequent because of the success that Ole Miss is able to have under this staff. And so, it's hard to put a finger on when a game of this importance has been, but if they could win it, then who knows what's next.
Well, Oklahoma's next, Jeff.
Hey, Tyler, what about this conference, man? I mean, you can't take a breath.
You can't.
I don't care who it is. You cannot. Every week, it might be Georgia, it might be Vandy. You better play.
Yeah, I did. Vanderbilt's a great story for another day, but I mean, I'll say this: Ole Miss does. I mean, they've had some tough games already. They got some tough games ahead. I mean, it could be worse. I mean, there's Oklahoma's schedule is absolutely bananas. I can't believe that they've got them playing that schedule, but it is a tough league, top to bottom. You're right, and even the teams like Vanderbilt that you used to be able to count, you can't count anymore. And I that's what makes it great. I mean, that's why weekends like this are so special, and this game at Georgia is such a big game. I was kind of interested, Jeff, to get your take on this, so that, the emergence of Trinidad Chambliss has been one of the most exciting developments of the season in Mississippi for anybody. What a great story he is for a guy like you that likes good stories. How good has he been?
Well, and I was thinking before we came on here, I haven't been around a lot of Division II sports. Y'all have, and because of your coverage of statewide Delta states and other things, but I haven't been around it a lot. But this guy, is obviously the premier Division II quarterback when he got here. But I mean, the things he's been able to do, maybe you say he had a little off day against Washington State that had, been compared to the other weeks he'd been playing. But I mean, it's a story like, I don't know that I've ever seen one quite like it. And how it unfolds from here on with Austin Simmons and other things in the mix will be interesting to see how it goes if they continue winning. And it's just, it's been a really a fun thing to watch, and people have really gotten on board with it and got the Trinidad flags and all those kind of things, hanging around town. And it's kind of become a phenomenon real quick.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how Kirby Smart approaches how they go after him. I would suspect that they're going to do kind of a control pass rush where they try to get in his way and not let him get loose. And we've seen in the last couple of weeks more passes batted down at the line, and
right.
I think Kirby being Kirby, he has noticed that.
Well, I think one thing I would say to that, you're right. There's a lot of, we always say film out there now, but people, coaches, others, they know what's going on. They know what they're up against or who they're playing and the personnel and all. But, it's kind of a thing where I guess if you'd say Trinidad Chambliss has never been in probably a situation quite like he's going to be in on Saturday. He played some other games here, but this will be, just in his own mind and heart. And I mean, it seems to be a really mature person, but it's going to be quite the challenge just to, I guess stay within yourself. But he seems to be a guy that can do that if he can just, limit the mistakes.
It's going to be really important for Ole Miss to get off to a good start and try to get the crowd. I've been to many games at Sanford Stadium, and that place can really, really get loud. They need to get off to a good start and keep the crowd out of it as much as they can.
Well, Dad, you mentioned the Kirby Smart and how they might approach Trinidad earlier. I would just take the playbook from Washington State. Yeah. Just kind of contain him, keep your hands up. Don't. If you over pursue, he'll make you pay. But the thing I think for Georgia, just if they're obviously one of the best teams in the country, they just got to start faster. Because if you look at their games, their close games this season, where they held off Auburn, they held off Tennessee. They've dug a hole against Alabama early. I mean, Kirby's made great halftime adjustments, so they just got to start faster. I think for Ole Miss, they just got to, I want to say they're 14th in the league in turnover margin, and they're the third most penalized team in the league. So I think if you clean those, those two things, I think if they are clean and crisp in those two areas, at least get to net zero on turnovers. I think they got a shot. Jeff, tell me about this. It seems like you mentioned the staff earlier and the success they've had, and boy, they are spending a king's ransom to keep them in Oxford, it seems like. But do you remember a staff that was this stacked? And even going down to the coordinators and position coaches?
Well, and again, I thought about that some before we started talking, and I've thought about it the last few days. And even looking back at the LSU weekend, I know that, some fans I talked to and different ones would, they were so upset or nervous with going into the game and, didn't know what to expect and, oh, it's a big game. And again, this week, the same kind of mentality. But yeah, they lose games from time to time. Kentucky last year was a disaster. And, then Georgia 2 years ago was very lopsided. But the confidence that when I come back to thinking about those kind of things, I do realize who they have on staff over there and how do they prepare and the things that this coaching staff is capable of. And 50 wins in 6 years, not even six yet, and 50 and 18, I think is what Lane is at Ole Miss now. And I didn't see that coming during COVID, but here we are. And so yeah, they're solid from top to bottom, it looks like. And some people have left the staff over the years and they've had to replace them. And I think he's done a good job with that. So as little as, or as trite as this sounds, I just think they know what they're doing and in a big way. So I'll give you one example, Rick, and I'm going to call this name and you'll know it. I walked into the stadium, actually rode to the stadium with Carl Jackson, a famous Mississippi musician living up in Nashville, and that was for the Kentucky game last year. And I said, Carl, looking back at the Ole Miss history, Kentucky's really, put some thorns in Ole Miss's side that have, cost them some things when my cousin Jim Weatherly was a quarterback and they were number one in the country, and Kentucky comes to Jackson and beats them in 64, and then 69 Archie and company go up with Coach Vaught to Lexington, and they're supposed to win the SEC, and they stumble and lose to Kentucky. And we were looking at that last year going into the stadium. I said, I'm confident that they can take care of business, but Kentucky's kind of been one of those you just never knew going way back. And he kind of laughed and said, yeah, he remembered some of that. So my point is, it doesn't always work out, but I do think that they have a pretty good handle on how to handle, not to be repetitive, these kind of games or any kind of situations. And last Saturday was an example of, they got it done. It didn't look very pretty at times, but as Rick said, that they came out with a W, and that's all that mattered in the end.
Yeah, in the end, there is there's that bottom line. Speaking of lines, I'm really surprised to see the point spread on this game, considering all that you just said. 50 and 19, undefeated this year, beat Georgia last year, and yet
it's a 7.5
point spread. I'm really surprised at that.
Yeah, it's hard for me to really figure out the way that they necessarily approach games like this. What were y'all thinking more in terms of what would you have said before you saw that?
I would have thought 3 or 4.
Yeah, I would give Georgia 3 for being at home. And then, other than that, kind of a toss-up. But, obviously they just want money on both sides of it. But, I think it would have been – things could have been different before last Saturday. You look at it, here are the people who do not like how Ole Miss played on Saturday. The college playoff committee, the pollsters, the odds makers, you know what I mean? And I'm sure Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. But I think I think for the first time you kind of saw some chinks in the armor, and I think that's what you're seeing.
That's a reaction. I think it's more a reaction to the Washington State game than and maybe too much of a reaction to the Washington State game. Everybody's going to have a bad game. Georgia certainly had one against Alabama.
Yeah, they did.
So
of course, Alabama's really good, for the record.
Yeah, they are.
For a team that can't run the ball, they're hell on wheels. Well, and I'll say this for Washington State: you guys are talking about the people that came down here. Have you ever been to Pullman, Washington? Because
I haven't.
All right. So, the way Washington is set up is like there's the Pacific side and then the inland side.
Yeah.
And inland Washington State looks like Mississippi, and this time of year feels like North Dakota. So if I was circling a game on the schedule to get the hell out of Eastern Washington, it would probably be the one in Oxford, Mississippi. So kudos to them for coming down. Wish they had.
Tyler, one thing I'll say on that too is, well, I think this makes it maybe even a little more impressive. I know we all say they came down from Pullman, but I met fans of theirs from Florida and from Dallas, and I mean they were in this area for the first time in years and years and years. They played at Auburn a few years ago, they said, but their stadium only holds about 40,000. So if you get 5 or 6 thousand of their fans together in Oxford, Mississippi, I mean, that to me is even more impressive. I mean, once upon a time, we all remember 35 and 40,000 seat stadiums in this state, and State and Ole Miss have certainly gone past that point. But I just kind of looked at it that way too, that for that number to show up when they don't have the Washington Husky crowds or the USC crowds out in LA. I mean, this is a smaller school and a smaller stadium, and they supported.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Jeff, we had one more thing we wanted to talk about today, and I don't know how familiar you are with the Ole Miss golf program. Football team's ranked number 5 in the country. The golf team's ranked number 4. And the reason I'm bringing that up is there's a big tournament at Fallen Oak down on the coast this week that Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Southern Miss host the tournament. And it's going to have 8 nationally ranked teams playing in it, including, of course, Ole Miss. And, boy, Chris Malloy has really done a good job with the Ole Miss golf program.
Yeah, I can talk to you about that. I had plans to go down for that tournament. I went 2 years ago, the first year they had it. Didn't go last year, but I've just had a lot of things going on, especially with the book signings and different things. And I thought, not going to make that trip. But I went down 2 years ago to Fallen Oak, and it was a great, great tournament. I think Ole Miss finished second. Seems like Auburn won it. I'm not sure, but yeah, that. If anyone's listening down on the coast, no matter if you're an Ole Miss fan or whoever, I would get out there and watch some golf. It's really, really quality golf in this state now. And I went down to West Point last year and watched a tournament, and been up to Nashville and watched one at Vandy. So I've tried to follow them because they are good. They are competitive. They can literally won a national championship, and certainly Michael Lasasso did last year as an individual champion, and that he was the second one that Chris Malloy and the program have produced in the last 8 years or so with Braden Thornberry. But Rick, everything changes, especially if you've been around as long as I guess we have and I have, and I was kind of worried 30 years ago, that maybe some of the programs when Ole Miss was having some rocky times with probation and everything, if they had to scale back some, golf might be in trouble or something. I didn't know. I just was speculating. But now it's a premier program in the country. And Chris Malloy played here, and I covered him when he was here. And he's come back and after being the head coach at South Florida and the assistant coach at Florida State, and he really, really done a good job with the program, and gotten some really good kids in here, and like you said, highly ranked, and I don't know, golf, you got to be on that day, and who can they win a whole national championship next spring? We'll see, but if they're on, they're as good as anybody.
They'd have to be one of the 3 or 4 favorites in the country to win the national championship next spring, and again, you're right. It depends on how you're playing that day, but Mississippi State won their last tournament at Kentucky. Southern Miss has won their last 2 tournaments against good fields. So it really is shaping up to be a good week on the coast. And
sounds like we're talking about baseball, Rick. You got
yeah.
Southern Miss, Mississippi State, Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about men's golf.
Well, I'm gonna get down there.
It's a great event down there. You going?
I'm gonna get down there at least for the last round and maybe the last 2 rounds. I'm trying to figure it out right now. But yeah, it should be really interesting. For those that don't know, Fallen Oak is it's as good as any golf course just about anywhere. It is a terrific test, and there's some quality teams that are going to test it this week.
What they have down there, was it a senior event or was it something?
They had a Champions Tour tournament for years.
Yeah.
And I mean, right now, this has become their marquee event, and they want to make this one of the top 3 or 4 tournaments in the country, and it's close to that right now.
Well, I would like to be there. And again, I was, planning on it. I'm looking in the spring schedule a little bit to, go back to West Point and watch them play. And then they go up to Vanderbilt and play. And that's always a good trip. And, I want to see them play some tournaments before this group is separated, I guess you would say, or done, because I really, really think it's a special team, and they got to be on those special days though, and we'll see how it turns out the next few months.
Well, Jeff, we really, again, appreciate you making the time for us this morning. For our listeners out there, if you're a baseball fan of any stripe, the latest book, Stories from Ole Miss Baseball, is a fantastic read, on shelves in bookstores around the state, and including Lemuria here in Jackson. Jeff, again, thanks for your time, man, and good luck this weekend.
Enjoyed it. It's fun. I'm glad I was on here with y'all, and I'll say this, it's up to y'all though, but let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely, my friend. And thanks again to Jeff for joining us, Dad. Anything else you're looking forward to this weekend? I feel like we are just hot and heavy with the college football right now. Yeah, I know you're going down to the golf tournament. Anything else going on in the world?
No, I'm going to watch. It's going to be a good afternoon of watching college football, and I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to get to the golf tournament on Sunday, I hope, Sunday and Monday.
Well, enjoy the trip to the coast. I'll be sure to bring your mail in for you again this week. Everybody have a good one out there. Stay safe. I hope your team wins this weekend. We'll talk to you in this space next week. Make sure to keep up with all of Rick's latest writings over at MississippiToday.org, and have a good one, everybody.